Hi, I'm Celia Boothman, founder of LTR Coaching, and I'd like to welcome you to the Inspired Triathletes podcast, where I'll be bringing you stories from female triathletes and taking on topics that are important to women in the sport. Hi, and welcome Hélène Guillaume. Guillaume, is that how I say it? My mum's French. I should have no excuse for my pronunciation. But Hélène is the CEO of Wild AI, and thank you very much for joining me here today. So just to get started, I'd like to ask you what it was that kind of motivated you, or was there kind of a moment when you were like, I need to set this app up, and the reasons behind it, what your motivations were, and what inspired you to set it up?
Yeah, I think being a woman in sports, I felt that all my training recommendations were always basically made for men. And at that time, particularly training in endurance sports like triathlon and ultramarathon running, I could really specifically see some differences. So, for instance, cycling, one week I would climb uphill like the men I was training with, and the week after I would be out of breath. And I couldn't understand why was there the differences, and there was no explanation anywhere. And so I got really, being a data scientist by training, I got really interested in understanding, is there any way for me to understand if there's a difference, if there's an advantage to be a woman, but also like just like our bodies doesn't really look alike, and the whole science or like the whole knowledge we had in sports was pinking at trinkets and like just
Yeah.
protocols as women. And like getting out of the swimming pool, I would be advised to drink a whole bottle of Gatorade, whereas my body is smaller than men,
Yeah.
and it didn't feel right, but I also didn't have any knowledge. So I tried to really understand, if I could understand better, but also the other part of it is that I felt that all the messaging towards women in sports was quite negative. Like, women are moody and bitchy, we're complicated, and also in sports we're just not interesting. So medias are not interested because we are literally not interesting. And so I felt like that's pretty negative and pretty grim. So is there another way for me to understand my own body? Is there a great way for me to understand my body? And yeah, the answer is yes, there is. So try to understand that, and that's what led me to this.
Cool. Yeah, I remember feeling that frustration as well. Like it was probably when I first started getting into triathlon and cycling, and it was like everything was, you just fit in with the men, you just, join this and do it that way. And kind of, I was often the only woman in cycling time trials and things like that. So you feel a little bit isolated and you just want to get on with it, but you know that there's something else as well, and there's something not the same, like you say. So that's really cool. It's interesting to hear your experiences as well, because I think things have changed as well quite a lot since you must have set. How long ago was it that you set up Wild Air right now?
Yes, 6 years ago.
Yeah. So like, I mean, was it last year, or I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, when the British football the Lions, I can't remember the name. I'm not into football, but I know it was all over the paper how they got as many views, if not more, than the male matches. So things have changed and improved quite a lot since then, haven't they?
Exactly.
And this will have played a part in that, I'm sure, raising awareness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just so you mentioned that you thought there was something different. Did you kind of try tracking your cycle, like just on paper or something like that? Did you sort of start, because you say you were interested in the data, did you start like logging that and finding the information yourself before you developed the app? Was that something that?
Yeah, I looked at the very first data set I looked at was my resting heart rate versus my menstrual cycle. So I would just plot that into Excel spreadsheets and saw
Okay.
that there was a tiny correlation. So then I got really interested in that, and I opened this Pandora box of what is a female physiology, how does it function, discovered Dr. Stacy Sims, and from there I convinced her to partner with us and really turn the knowledge that is on female physiology into something that is actionable at the fingertip of women in an app. So,
Yeah.
like drawing the correlations, like what is said in ovulation, what can we learn from it, and how can we turn that into something that is easy and usable, that doesn't read like very researchy. And that was the huge amount of work that we did behind for many years.
Mm. Yeah, so it's sometimes hard, isn't it, to you read the information and it can be a bit confusing because there are some conflicting things out there as well. Like some people are saying, "Oh, don't, it doesn't matter, it doesn't make any difference," and other people are saying that it does. And I definitely think, well, I know that it does because of my experience that it makes a difference. But how would you? I know in the app there's recommendations for nutrition and recovery and that kind of thing. So what kind of are there any examples that you can give of things that people can do when they are, if they do notice that some correlation between their cycle and their training and how they perform or how they feel even?
Yeah, generally speaking, there's a bell curve, which is not valid for all women. But for instance, women with a menstrual cycle very often would have a behavior, an underlying behavior that's like a bell curve. So basically, we have a female readiness score, and what we've seen is that it peaks at ovulation, so it goes up until ovulation, the readiness score, and then it drops when the premenstrual symptoms arrive, and then day 3 of the period it start going up again.
Mm,
And that is a very traditional and typical curve of readiness score, which reflects everything that is behind, i.e., wearable data and manual check-in data. So from resting heart rate variability, sleep patterns, and how they feel. I feel more empowered. I have higher sex drive. I feel more eager to train, etc.
mm,
And some women have the exact opposite. But let's say for that use case of women who do follow that pattern, typically around ovulation, increase fats and carbs, the body really needs it. It's also when women feel more keen to do high intensity workouts, where the body is the most ready to do that in the training, and then going towards the end of the cycle, when they might experience premenstrual symptoms, for instance, bloating, they can
mm,
increase hydration, electrolytes, and cold water immersion to prepare the body and reduce the negative symptoms. And what we see is that women who follow that, often they see their negative symptoms going down, which is
mm.
really rewarding. And they track it, and then they see it in numbers as well, that they have better symptoms. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we are, you were talking earlier about the negative kind of depiction of women in sport. Well, there's a negative depiction of having a period in sport or like, well, in life really. It's like it's seen as or said as being something negative when actually there's a lot we can do to improve our symptoms. Like you say, there's things we can do, and being if we're aware of that and we don't go, okay, oh, this is going to be a bad day, say, okay, what can we do to mitigate those symptoms? What can we do to improve them so that I don't have a bad day? Or and if I do have a bad day, I know why that's happening rather than like, oh, just feeling awful about yourself or awful about the training session and kind of beating ourselves up about that, because that doesn't do you any good, especially when you're in that low hormone phase. You need to be as have as much positive input as you possibly can, really. Um,
Yeah, and
if you,
also like changing the messaging, I think is important.
mm,
Like I think it's like we all have, men and women have a daily cycle. We wake up in the morning, we're pumped, we go to bed in the evening, we're tired, and it's a normal cycle, and we understand it, we respect it. And sometimes we might go off and party until 4 a.m. and it doesn't matter. And as
mm,
women, we have ingrained in our bodies this natural cycle, which also when we want to get off it, it doesn't matter. Like when, if generally speaking, we are in balance, it actually works really well, which is a
mm,
very important consideration, because often we get told like, oh, but then she doesn't perform in certain times. And that's not true. It's
mm,
overall, if you follow this methodology, overall your body is more performant and you feel more in touch with yourself as a woman. And so like changing the messaging as well is important, because it's actually a power that we have and we can harness. Is like very much the female body behaves as an athlete. Like we have, we perform and then we recover. And then if we follow that pattern, which is a shorter pattern than a typical male mesocycle training for triathlon, it doesn't impact negatively your training at all. The opposite. It's just a different way to look at it.
Mm. Yeah, and it's like not battling against something and trying to pretend it doesn't exist. It's kind of going with it and accepting it and enjoying the having that time. It's like when you don't feel, certain times I just don't feel like I want to go out or do certain things, and it's like if I was going to go, no, I'm going to go anyway, then I feel awful when I go and I don't have a good time. Whereas, okay, this is a temporary thing. I'm going to probably going to enjoy it more if I do it on this, at another time when I feel like I really want to go and do that thing, rather than kind of forcing yourself. And sometimes you kind of do have to force yourself to do certain things, in your training to get the gains. I'm not saying we should never do that, but it's quite good to be aware and have that input and that knowledge underlying or underpinning everything, so that we can kind of make better decisions in training, because there are times when you actually do need to back off, and I'm not sure that everybody's particularly good at noticing or understanding when that actually happens. So it really helps with that. So we've talked about uh, your experience and your personal stories about tracking. And is there anything, we kind of touched on this, but for improving our performance using the tracking, um, we've talked about how listening to your body or having a different kind of training protocol potentially, where we actually take into account what the hormones are doing and use that to inform our training. Is there anything else that you think like helps us to improve our performance as we're as we're tracking or using tracking?
And I think that tracking is helpful as well, generally, because what we measure, we can improve.
Mm,
And so for women who do not have a wearable, like you can use Wild AI, but I find it really helpful to have a tracker. So to get started with that and start to understand as well certain metrics like resting heart rate, heart rate variability, what does this mean? And then testing around what works for us, because each body is different, each cycle is different, and using the app helps going for that. And if you use a birth control, understand also what is behind. So there are a lot of different birth control. We can cover 148. So if you're taking the pill, is it a combined pill, progestin and estrogen, or is it a progestin only? Is it a copper IUD, or is it a hormonal IUD? And how does it impact the body, and how does it impact also your hormonal fluctuations, if any? And
mm,
then how can it apply to me as a woman in particular? So each use case is quite different. And then women who enter perimenopause, what are the symptoms that I might be exposed to? From, like, we know the hot flushes, but that's actually only one of the symptoms. There's memory loss, there's brain fogs, the fats that don't like get placed in the same areas of the body, and they change. So how can we understand those, and how can we prepare for it? What can we do as well to prepare for aging, like for instance osteoporosis? What can we do? Weightlifting is really important. So
mm.
yeah, I think the educational part is really important, and there is a lot of that in the app. It's like the education is quite huge.
Yeah,
Yeah, so if for each use case, for each woman is quite different as well.
yeah. Yeah, so that's all the information in the app is going to help your performance by following the guidelines with as far as recovery goes. And a lot of the stuff I think is kind of like basic things that people often don't get right, like making sure you have rest and recovery, making sure that you get enough sleep, and optimizing that time before so that you can get enough sleep so that you can recover. A lot of people don't get those basics right, and I think it's a reminder in the app, isn't it? There are reminders about those basic things about getting enough sleep and to making sure that you have protein and carbohydrates after a session. And then there's specific guidelines as to how much in there. I think, for me now, coming into perimenopause, I'm finding it's a lot harder now because I've found that I was understanding my cycle, and it was like, okay, I know where I am. I know how everything is working. And now I'll be like, God, I feel awful and I don't know why. And it's just confusing. And it was, I was all right for a bit. And then as soon as any stress comes in, there's that affects me a lot more. And I guess that happens for everybody, anybody that, even, if you have, if if you have a normal and or a normal, I don't want to say normal because there's no such thing, but a natural cycle, or you're on the pill, or whatever sort of stage you are in, when stress comes in and hits you, then that's going to kind of throw a curveball into it as well. So we have to be aware of that. And there is opportunities to record that, isn't there, in the app, your stress levels and how you're feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's really interesting time of life, perimenopause, because we've been
Mm,
used to a menstrual cycle for 40 years or so, like from 12 to like 52. But like in the middle there, at the end of it, we are having these perimenopausal symptoms, and very often we, like right now, first of all, a lot of women never heard the word perimenopause,
mm.
and we're getting more aware of it. So how can we prepare for it better? How can we be aware of it? And yeah.
Yeah, I think being aware of it and understanding it's going to happen it's, it's the first step. And I think there's a lot more people talking about it now, which is
Yeah,
great, and it is getting a lot more information. But I sometimes feel like it's kind of pushed into hormone replacement therapy, which is fine if that's what is going to work for you, but it's not the only solution. There's all sorts of other things that you can do, and being reminded of that and understanding it as well.
exactly. And I
Just
think there again, it's like the education and access to information is so important, which we
mm,
really lack, generally speaking.
yeah, it kind of like it's almost gone so far, like, because we weren't talking about it at all, really. And then everyone starts talking about it, and then it went to kind of like everyone should take HRT. Um, and I think it sort of needs to balance back a little bit, because we've
Mm.
almost gone like everybody should be doing this because, but you can never say everybody should be doing something. That's never really good advice for anyone, is it? We're all different. We've all got completely different lives. We've got different ways of looking at things as well. So
And also like the symptoms that are linked to it, like what would I go through if I don't take HRT? What would I go through if I take HRT? What does it impact me positively and negatively? And just being aware, and then we can take decisions.
mm,
What are the natural options as well, not to use HRT, if any, and then like being able to take decisions while we, yeah, just more aware basically.
yeah, and I think there's still more work, still more information that we need to get out there for all women, really, so that they don't think it's like a one size fits all, because it isn't. It's just everybody has got different symptoms. They have different things going on in their life. They've got different ways of managing stress. There's just so many things that impact your training on a regular basis. And if we kind of ignore one of them, which is why, not tracking and kind of ignoring your menstrual cycle is, I think you're missing a huge part of your life, basically, if you don't do it. I mean, I think I was doing it quite a long time ago, just with there's an app called Hormone Horoscope.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was quite good because it just sort of explained how you were feeling and things like that. I was like, yeah, this is exactly right. Because I only started tracking when I wanted to get pregnant, which is
Yeah.
probably the case for a lot of women. They're like, oh, I want to get pregnant, so I need to know when I ovulate, and that's when they start. But when I started, I was like, oh, I can see the benefits here of understanding this more. Whereas I was brought up in a time where it was like, to be good at sport, you want to be like a man, you want to just fit in with the men and do what they do. So, we ignored it a lot of the time. Cool. So how has the app evolved, do you think, since you first started? The
Yeah, I mean, like, first of all, the product itself has evolved a lot. Some women have been using it for a long time, and they can see the real evolution. It's pretty crazy how it evolved. Visually, like at the beginning, we had the designer only very late because we wanted to create the best product for women, and we never had much money, so so it visually changed a lot. And then also we started with menstrual cycle, and then we expanded to women in perimenopause and menopause, and then women who use birth control. So life stages have expanded, sports have expanded. We started definitely with endurance sports and Garmin as a tracker, and now we've expanded to a plethora of sports. Basically, you can pretty much add any sport you want, and a lot of wearables. So we integrated with Garmin, Aura, Fitbit, Apple Health, Strava, Training Peaks. So quite a lot of options as well. And so it evolved quite a lot. And now we have 84,000 women using the app. So going really well.
yeah, that's cool. That's really good. So so the app, to use the app, what you do, you download it and then you can input your data and you get a report, don't you, about your cycle, and that kind of information is available for you to look at to see if there's any patterns or correlations. And how much does Wild AI kind of spot those patterns and give you that information?
Yeah. So you download the app, you choose like your life stage. I mean, perimenopause, I use a birth control, which one, or I mean, menstrual cycle, or etc. And then each of these life stages have a different experience. And then you can connect with your wearables if you have any. If you don't, you can just skip that. And then on the daily basis, we take the data from wearables, manual input, gives a female readiness score and the recommendations. And then you write at the end of each month, if you don't have a cycle, or at the end of each cycle, if you do, we provide you these reports where you can see these heat maps of symptoms, and you can draw correlations by seeing like basically heat maps. And you can see, for instance, I have a pain and it always seems to be between like day 15 and then 20 of my menstrual cycle, and
Okay.
turns out it's probably when I'm ovulating as well, depending on like the amount of days of each cycle. And then you can actually start understanding that this is ovulation pain. So women draw a lot of correlations out of that, which is really interesting. And
Hmm.
the other side is, if you have a coach, you can also share your data with your coach. So we have a coach dashboard where they can see all the women. It's obviously by opt-in and data, so they can also have a more informed conversation with their coach with all data sets, trying to understand why certain things happening, like so a more in-depth conversation. And it's very helpful for the coaches who want to train women specifically with the female physiology in mind and the research that is behind, and use a tool that really facilitates that. So that's the coach dashboard. And now we have the coach academy as well to upskill coaches, which we
Yeah,
just
yeah. I've just seen
really.
that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I use it with my athletes to find out, just to see where they are in their cycle, and it really helps. Um, but I have one or two athletes where some people it's more of a priority for us to use it, and other times it isn't because there's too much else going on to. So it's like it sort of changes priority for me depending on where people are and also what else is going on in their life, basically. So we can. I have got people in some high stress situations at the moment, and it's something else, but the other things are more sort of they're impacting that person more than their cycle is at the moment. So it's kind of taking a little bit of a back seat at the bit, but it'll probably come back into play a bit later on. So it's really good to have the information there. How do you find? I don't know if you'll have this information or not, but when people are in perimenopause, have they reported that they do have kind of like regular symptoms? I mean, I personally, I can tell you that I know where I am when my period starts. It's like, okay, I understand this bit. And then it kind of gets a bit like, what's going on? Am I here? Am I there? Because I've been having like 50, 60 days between some cycles, and then the next one will be completely normal. Um, but yeah, if you have the data on whether people do manage to get some kind of feedback or information from that.
Perimenopause in particular is very interesting because it is the time where the traditional symptoms that are quite regular and follow time series are actually trying to start to change. But
Mm,
what is interesting though is that sometimes it is repetitive.
mm,
So we also, it's quite hard to correlate certain things with certain times. And so we might have a much longer cycle, we might not ovulate sometimes. And so being able to correlate certain things that we used to have. So, for instance, I'm going back to the same example, ovulation pain. Um, we like what is really helpful is understanding what is my norm and what is diverting from the norm. So if
mm,
I understand when I'm ovulating, and one thing that I love, have been using well there enough for years myself, is that I'm so much more in touch with my own body. I used to, as you said, like ignore, like trying to copy and replicate, like having a male body and
mm,
have no symptoms, and I would be very proud of having no symptoms. And I realized I was actually not having any symptoms. It's just that I was like muting them entirely
yeah.
because I thought it was something negative. Whereas now I can, that I flip the messaging in my head, which is actually it's a power to have a cycle. Um, I'm trying to understand how I can listen to my body better. You know, like when you want to pee, you feel in your body you want to pee, and you're like, these
Yeah.
are the symptoms, and this is what is happening. But
Yeah.
when we ovulate, we don't feel it, but we could because we actually, there are a lot of things that are very characteristic. Some women have
Mm,
ovulation pain, but not all. Some like the way you feel the way very empowered. Your sex drive might be very high. You really want to get out and be very proactive and very convincing. So you can track these things and you can be like, yeah, okay, I'm ovulating. And then you can track things physically in your body. You can track your cervical fluids, you can
mm,
track the position of your cervix, how it's happening inside. So like touching and understanding better the body. And so by, and then obviously you can track with an elate strip and then just looking at like if you are ovulating or not. And so, which is more data tracked. And then you can look at your objective data sets. If you have a wearable, or if you try tracking your temperature, like if you have an aura, or if you're tracking manually your temperature, you can see the body basal temperature changing.
yeah.
You can actually, like, if you understand, if you track all these things, you can start to be more aware, and then you can lose some of these metrics. So you can lose maybe the tracking of temperature and all these things, because you can feel in your body and you can recognize that this actually means ovulation. And what's really interesting when we go from there into perimenopause is that we can start understanding that maybe I haven't ovulated this month, so I would feel different symptoms, and we can prepare better as well for the symptoms. So if we are lacking certain nutrients because we are in perimenopause, we can also prepare better, so the body is better prepared, and we have less negative symptoms such as memory loss, or more
Mm,
bloating, or digesting badly certain food, because we just prepare better.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because I went through a phase of tracking my temperature, and then I did it for a while, and then I was like, "Oh, I'm going to stop doing this now because I kind of know when it is." But I find it quite interesting to do tracking like that, like sort of go in depth for a while,
Yeah.
because it just gives you feedback and reassures you as well that you know or you understand properly. And I remember using the pee sticks when I was training a lot
Yeah.
for checking that I was hydrated properly. That's in the Stacey Sims book, um, and she talks about getting dehydrated and how you can. She had people doing hill reps and
Yeah.
then using the pee sticks in between the hill reps to check that they were hydrating properly. So I did use them for a while when I was training a lot because I just found it interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
and then you learn, and then you can be like, okay, fine. Now I know
yeah,
some things. I can go on my next metric.
yeah, you don't have to do everything all the time because that could be a bit overwhelming. And I think some people think they do have to do everything all the time. And you kind of maybe get to a point where it's like, it's okay now. I understand. I trust my body. You learn how it feels and you learn to trust that intuition a little bit more than, we've kind of lost touch with that quite a bit, I think, all of us, because it has been squashed, I think, from our society, is like, you don't want to trust intuition. It's kind of like a, you know, just ignore that, ignore that, ignore that. And we don't want to ignore that because it's often a really good indicator. But I think we often need the reassurance from the data that our intuition is right, if you see what I mean. So it's like having the science help you kind of move forward in that way. So I found it really useful. And it is quite interesting. Maybe I'll start tracking my temperature again to find out what's going on. But the other day I was like, I feel like I should be ovulating because I tracked the like cervical fluid, and I was like,
Yeah.
this just seems too close to my period as well. It's just everything just seems a bit off. It's like there's some weird. Well, obviously there's weird stuff going on because that's the time of your life when it is everything is changing a lot, and it is interesting and kind of disconcerting as well.
It's very much puberty number two.
Yeah, yeah. No, when it first kicked in, I was like, oh, I feel like a horrible teenager again. I
Exactly.
don't like it. And yeah, I'm just like, why am I in a bad mood? Why am I being so like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really hard. But, making sure that the nutrition is right. And I think it is harder as well because things change with nutrition. You do have to do things slightly differently. I mean, I've always looked after that side of things anyway, but you kind of can't get away with not doing that when you and as you're getting into this stage really. And energy levels have been a bit off, but I think that's to do with mood as well, and
Yeah.
just the time of year. I blame that as well. I think it does have an impact though. We do. It's like what I like about tracking, and you're talking about the natural cycle, is it reflects nature and the natural cycle that is the summer and the winter and the seasons as well. And it's like it helps you to become in touch with that, which then helps you with your training, going, okay, at this time of year this is what I need to be focusing on. So it sort of gets you into that mindset of there are seasons and cycles with everything, and helps you to put those in place in your life.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to talk about your surfing because I know you surf
Yeah.
now. Have you found, what kind of things have you found? Give us some personal kind of insights into what you found with tracking and your experience of surfing.
Surfing. So I started surfing 3 years ago, I think, and I find it's probably the hardest sport I've ever done, but equally the most rewarding. So
Mm,
I started as an adult. I think it's a bit like skiing. Like if you haven't started as a kid, you will never surf as well as kids have,
yeah.
like, yeah, started. So that's okay. Like my ambition in surfing is not extremely high, but I love it, and I think the mix of hormones that happen during surfing is quite incredible. Like you have the unknown because you don't know if you're gonna have a good session or not. You don't know if you're gonna catch that wave or not. Whereas if you're going for a run or a bike ride, it's pretty known. Like you know your route, you can predict your speed, and there are very little unknowns elements. And then because of the unknown, like the variable reward, it creates a lot of excitement. And then you have the adrenaline, and then the fear, and then like just the bliss of like the sliding. And there is, I think, something very special about sliding. I don't know how as humans, I don't know
Mm,
the science behind, but as humans we love this sliding effect, like cycling you sliding, skiing
mm,
you slide, and surfing. And it's very, I don't know if it's the internal ear that puts us in a flow state, which is very exciting. And then you eventually catch that wave, and
mm.
then boom, you get smashed. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and you always finish a wave by falling as well. So it's quite humbling. And yeah, so really love it, and it's definitely very challenging, which I like because it's new and different. And
Mm.
yeah, so
Have,
totally amateur, but loving it.
have you found like your fear changes at different times? Your sort of fear levels at
Yeah,
all?
definitely. I think having had like my first baby. So before my first baby, I had a miscarriage, and after the
Okay.
miscarriage, I felt, I think as a person, I felt very unsure. So my
Mm,
self confidence and my self worth, I think, plummeted because of the miscarriage. And so when I went back to the water, I really doubted myself, which is very
okay.
weird. I can't really explain the correlation, but it's definitely correlated because I could feel like there was definitely a before and an after, and
Mm,
I had to work again on my fear level because surfing is facing a big nature element that is
mm,
moving all the time. So it's yeah, as a fear factor is probably the sport I've done, which is the scariest,
mm,
and so it's highly correlated to how I feel internally.
mm.
And it's also a constant work in progress because I might like build it up, and so my confidence and my ability rise, and then as I said, like with the miscarriage, then it goes down, and I have
Yeah,
to build it up again, and then I go out in a day that is a little bit too hard for me, and I need to pull back. So it's a very interesting relationship, which I appreciate a lot because it's yeah, it pushes all the time my capabilities, and I can question it a lot, but I can work on it. And I think it's interesting having done a lot of sports in my life, being in the situation where I'm very humbled again. And also,
mm,
unlike running or cycling, where I know that I can push myself, like for instance, if I'm cycling with some guys and they're like, okay, come on, like, like doing a hard bike ride, like 120K training with a lot of hills, it would be out of my depth. But then I would say like, okay, I'll try. And then as I'm riding, the group emulates this energy, and I'm like, okay, I want to push myself and I want to go forward. That's definitely something I've done in many sports, but in surfing I can't. Like it's
you're
just
on your own. Yeah,
yeah. First of all, you're on your own, and like when other people are like, come on, you can do it. It actually it doesn't work with someone else. It's like it's me and
yeah,
nature, and if I can't do it, I'm going to really hurt myself.
yeah.
So it's a very different relationship, I think, to nature, to the sport, to the community as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I used to surf, not very much, but my husband and I did surf a bit, and I understand that. And I think I used to get frustrated because it was like we were doing it before I had children, and then it would be like the conditions were, are they going to be any good? And there was all that, the sort of variable. That's why I got into triathlon, because it's like I can just go out and I can run, and that's it. It's done. Whereas now my kids are older, I'm getting back into climbing, which is much more like the conditions have to be right, and it takes a lot longer. And I've got more time to do that, whereas before I didn't, and I just wanted to spend my time, exercising as much as I could, basically. But yeah, it's really interesting that kind of like it's you do have to really listen to yourself and how you feel about the conditions and the situation. And when I started, I think I was so ignorant. I did some stupid things and scared myself, and then I had to kind of back off quite a bit. But being in the sea and the water is beautiful. And you're in Portugal at the moment; it's got some massive waves, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some big waves out there. Has it got like there was the biggest wave or something that was surfed there, wasn't there? It's
Yeah, like
huge.
100 foot wave. It hasn't actually reached 100 foot yet, but yeah.
Yeah,
Easily.
it looks terrifying. Do you get to watch that? Do you get to see it where you are, or are you?
Yeah, I've been one day when it was really big, and it is really impressive. And I
Wow.
had the opportunity as well to get towed into it when it was very
Oh my
small. It was
god.
really, because although it was small, and it was 3 meters, it's still a wave with a lot of water, and
Yeah,
it's a very iconic place. It's like at the bottom of a cliff with a lighthouse on top, and
yeah,
you can feel the vibrance of the place and like all the water coming in. And it's crazy.
yeah. It looks amazing. I have watched some footage of it, and I'm just like, whoa. It's amazing. Yeah, oh, that's so cool. Yeah, so you've got a child now then. You've had a baby, did you say? Yeah.
Yeah,
How old are they?
she's 15 months.
Okay. So yeah, early. It's hard work. Well done for getting out and surfing with,
Yeah.
that's good that you're managing to do that. That's awesome. So because I guess your hormones is going to have changed quite a lot as well in this, like tracking has changed with you. If you're breastfeeding or anything like that, then that would have altered things quite a bit.
Definitely.
Yeah. And did you notice that with, when you were tracking to see those changes?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I didn't have a period for quite a long time after birth,
Mm,
and then when it came back, I'm still breastfeeding, and definitely I feel. I mean, my body is definitely very different, and my energy expenditure is still huge. So,
mm,
and I think again, it's badly understood. So
yeah.
it's interesting to see what is behind.
Yeah, I think, it's I quite often get people and they're like, they're pregnant or they're going to have a baby, and you just don't know what it's going to be like before you have a baby. And then it happens, and you're like, oh my God, what's just happened? It's really like disruptive. It's a massive change in your life, and your hormones have changed, and your body's changed as well. And, I was desperate to get back to being fit and losing the weight. And, it was just like I put so much pressure on myself the first time round, and, desperate to get back to training. And I see so many women doing this, desperate to get back to how they were, and how it was before. And it's never going to be exactly the way it was before. It's going to be a lot different, but you can still do a lot. And I think the advice that we get is quite often really terrible. From the health professionals that don't really understand anyway. Unless you go looking for information, there's still some really outdated advice that's being given to people who are pregnant, and after you've had the baby as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. So did you have any, like, how did your exercise look before you had your your daughter?
I mean, it's changed completely. So I think postpartum, I didn't do much, and then after that, I still kept it very low touch. I think there's this crazy emphasis on getting the body back, but I don't.
Mm,
I mean, it takes 9 months to make a baby, and probably takes 9 months to like have a lot of things put itself back in place. But I really try not to rush into performers. Like I try to think of it as a huge new life stage, and
yeah.
I appreciate it. And so, yeah, going back to surfing, but also before the baby, I would love waking up before 6 a.m. For me, there was um, a big tick of like a success.
Mm,
And then after the baby, I just like spend a lot of time in the morning, like in bed with her and taking care of her and really appreciating this slow day and slow movement. So
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that sounds good. It's much better than what I did.
but how did you do it?
It was back. So the first time round, I was just like, oh, I didn't like being pregnant because it was like my body was changing. I sort of was resisting it, even though, that's what I wanted. And then when he was born by C-section, and I really didn't want a C-section either. I was really angry that I'd ended up having a C-section because I think they made some mistakes with what happened as well. And so I was just like, I want to get back to run. I remember like just storming around, pushing the pram, and I wasn't in a good place really that after he was born. And yeah, I struggled a lot because I was just resisting it. It sounds like you came to terms with things, or had a much better mindset than I did at the time. Oh, it was. it was really tough, and I think a lot of people feel like that, that, like, it's just because of the body changing, and if you resist that and you don't want it to happen, or you're scared. And, I was scared, I suppose, of the changes and what was going on, and then I just found it really hard to adjust because he didn't sleep, and I just, I didn't know what I was doing. I was getting all this different advice about how to look after your baby and how to, so it wasn't great. And then the second time around was fine because I'd done it before, and I was like, I'm not going to do it like that again. I'm just going to relax. Like, so, like, just, let it, let the time happen as it was meant to rather than resisting it. And it worked so much better, so much more less stressful. But yeah, so I think, from what you've said, like, it sounds like you've got a really good idea of how to, listen and respond to your body and intuit what happens. And I think sometimes endurance athletes, we don't necessarily do that. And that's where it can help us by using an app like that, like Wild AI, because it does just, it gives you that backup and that kind of information that it's okay, this is normal, it's not a weakness, it's nothing to try and run away from or be scared of. Accept it, embrace it, use it to your advantage rather than
Yeah.
going,
Yeah, and I think we don't give ourselves enough credit as well. Like when we have a baby, it's insane. Like it's a massive accomplishment, and this is not how society portrays us. It says,
mm-mm,
"Oh, it's so annoying. They're going to maternity, losing jobs. Like the pay gap increases because they're
mm,
leaving maternity," and it's such negative messaging.
yeah,
So instead of saying like, "Thank you for creating the whole of humanity," we
yeah,
will support you entirely and have equal paid paternity leave, and like put real measures in place to really provide to women like what they should have, which is a place in society where we do an incredible job. It's like it's
mm,
insane what we're doing, and there we don't really have credit for that. And because we don't have credit for that, I think our messaging is quite negative. So we're trying to perform all the time, and whereas it is a huge performance. And so
yeah,
when I look back on my year, I'm like, what have I done? I'm like, well, I did create a whole baby, so it's like it's
yeah,
huge. And and yeah, I really don't think society and hence ourselves as well gives ourselves enough credit. And I'm grateful. Actually, there was a woman who was an athlete, and she told me she said similar to you. She had two kids, and she said the first kid she took it as a performance, and
mm,
going back to sports was she took it as a performance. So I tried to learn from her experience and just enjoy it a lot. And I think it's like after my first 100 kilometers ultra marathon, I was like so tired, like I couldn't move for 24 hours from my bed,
mm,
and and I think I was much younger, so I could bounce back very quickly. But it's really important to give ourselves recovery time, and this is an athlete. Like
mm,
it's actually inconsiderate and like stupid to think that the body doesn't need recovery. And I
yeah,
think because female pregnancies and childbirth are not presented as a physical feat and a
no,
performance, it's like, well, just go back to it.
yeah, you just pop it out and carry on.
And you had 6 weeks postpartum,
Yeah,
good, you're good, signed off, you
I
can go
know,
back
yeah.
to school, sex, etc. And it doesn't work like that. It's
No, I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It is crazy, and it is like, quite often in the media, that's what you see, isn't it? Oh, look, this person, she's got it all, she's done it all, she's got doing all these things, and she's got her babies, and you're like, and it's like, but what you don't see in that situation as well is all of the support that that person is probably getting behind the scenes, and also I don't know whether we should be promoting that message. I get really mixed feelings about it because I'm like, yeah, that's great. We're telling women that we shouldn't stop doing what we love doing, but also we do need to look after ourselves as well and make sure that we give ourselves time to recover and also enjoy your family and spending time with them and being a mother because that is a valuable thing for us to be. Like you say, I think we don't value society doesn't value it, and
Yeah.
It's just something that's expected of women to just do, and
Yeah.
you know, you just carry on and do all this as well. It's just becomes like a massive amount of stuff that becomes an expectation, and it shouldn't be. I think there's ways that we can, you know, be more present and not feel that that's a failure for not doing everything. We can be good at, you know, being a mother is one of the most important things, really. And you do forget how much you're doing, like, day to day. Cool. Okay. So we'll wrap it up here. Um, is there anything else that you want to add to, you know, people will find you? I'm going to put some links down to your
Yeah, use
website,
the
your
app.
app and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
You're an active woman, use the app. If you are a coach, use the coach dashboard and the coach academy. You can upskill yourself. The course created with Dr. Stacey Sims.
Yeah.
So the best you can find in the world. And so you will have a certificate on like training women.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
That's okay. And what you have got some supplements as well, haven't you, that you've just launched? I don't know if you want to quickly.
Supplements for women who have a menstrual cycle and perimenopause, menopause. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'll put those links down below, and if there's any other links, I'll pop an email over, see if there's anything else that you want me to link to, and you can put them at the bottom in the show notes. But yeah, thank you very much for chatting to me today. It's been really interesting. Good luck with your surfing. Enjoy it, and yeah, really great that you're enjoying being a mum and integrating everything really, really well. Thanks for listening today. Have a great day. Take care. Bye for now.